New South Wales Liberal Senator Jim Molan, welcome back on Flow.
Ricky, good to be back. Thank you.
Look, we really appreciated the chat we had with you last time. Some really important topics on fuel security, among other things. It's just really brought to the fore now with a conflict in Ukraine involving Russia.
I think it has, Ricky, and what it should tell us about liquid fuels in one way is one thing, but we've got to remember that energy in general, energy to run our houses and our factories and our infrastructure and the services that governments provide, energy is the basis of national security. And the way that the dependence of Europe on Russian energy, the way that's impacting the thoughts and the actions of Europe, I think, is an object lesson to us.
We noticed, during a lot of the commentary with various climate change conferences as well, China would say one thing and then sort of kick the can down the road later on and say, due to this, that or whatever issue, we're going to keep using our fossil fuels. Do we have to revisit some of the renewable energy debate now in light of where Russia and China are positioning in a military sense?
I don't think we have to do it in a military sense. It's much more of a political and environmental issue, and I think we now have a policy which I believe is the best policy that you can have for climate change, for the simple reason that all the kind of esoteric arguments, the arguments that seem that I have had for many, many years about who is right and who is wrong on this, become irrelevant if our customers in 5 years' time say, no, we don't want any of your coal, we want hydrogen or something along those lines. So our policy is the best for the fact that all of our major customers for energy, and China is not one, all of our major customers for energy are looking for green energy. Now, can you get green hydrogen? That's an interesting question. I think it's going to be very, very hard to ever get truly green hydrogen, but it doesn't matter. We're exporting hydrogen now to Japan from Victoria. So I wouldn't revisit it, but what we should understand is that if we're going to be, if national security becomes the issue that it should become, and I think it will, if we look at it from first principles, having the ability to run cheap and have cheap energy, which is reliable and affordable in any country, but particularly in Australia, we need coal. We need coal-fired power plants. And so I think that the government, when they look at Cannon Brooks and others who are trying to buy these assets so they can close them down, I think when the government looks at that, they will have national security front of mind.
Well, we look at the Gaza price as well when it comes to petrol or diesel, spiking, of course, off the back of the conflict and concerns in the Ukraine. But you've been speaking a long time about Australia needing to reserve some fuel, and it's not just because of, I guess, these price spikes, but it's about whether the fuel can get here in the first place.
Well, that's very, very true. And we bought a lot of crude, which we stored in the US because they've got enormous storage capacity. But the US in particular has got to think through its own approach to its own energy, because it buys 500,000 barrels of oil per day from Russia, which is about 7 or 8% of the total that is used in the US. And as they pay more for that, they assist President Putin to afford the aggressive thuggery that he's involved in now, this prolonged and bloody vicious war that he's going to get himself involved in. We know the American motorists are funding that. And I think we get a tiny bit from Russia. I don't think we get much at all, if anything. But I think that the big message is that for national security, you've got to have energy. Where do you get energy from? Well, you get energy from a mix of reliable sources, the majority of which at the moment are coal. And when those that want to close them down early come to the government for permission to buy the company, or then if they want to use foreign investment, they've got to go before the Foreign Investment Review Board, which is required to look at every investment from a national security point of view.
Just looking at that fuel topic, though, the American arrangement was sort of, I guess, something in the absence of doing something domestically onshore. It seems to me it's a bit like saying I've got a carton of Tui's at a mate's fridge, but he's a pretty thirsty bloke. Wouldn't it be better to have the carton of Tui's in our own fridge?
It'd be much nicer to have that carton in our own fridge. But we've stored, billions and billions of barrels of oil, just happen to be stored in the ground for the last billion years. And the problem is that the states won't let us explore for that. Then when we find it, most of it, we have already found it, the states won't let us pull it out and put it through refineries. We've only got 2 refineries left. So there is a big field in the Northern Territory which we are exploiting at the moment, and that will produce an extraordinary amount if we can get it somewhere to refine it, and that's a long way from our current refineries. There are answers to all these technological problems, and all it needs is the will to do it. We can't make the states do everything, as we know, make states do anything, as we know from COVID. So we've got to convince the states that the need is so great that they've got to get away from their view that we should not exploit mineral resources which are under their ground.
When it comes to moving goods into Australia or sending it overseas, for instance, Australian grain had a great harvest this year in the Riverina and other parts of the nation. These issues concerning China and whether when they're shining a laser on one of our planes recently, they're active in our waters, we understand, and in their skies as well. Is there going to be a challenge for us about getting our goods away as well as getting them in?
Well, not at the moment. And I think that the challenge that I talk about is a challenge that occurs as tensions increase far more than they are at the moment. And most of the challenge comes not from the fact that some foreign power might stop the ships or do something like that. It comes from the fact that if there is tension or war in a particular area, the ships just won't come because they can't get insurance. But we're nowhere near that at the moment. There would have to be a very, very significant change in the strategic environment for that to happen. So I'm not overly worried about that. But when it happens, it's likely to happen fast, and therefore we should be prepared. We should be prepared now. And I think the message out of the Ukraine is that NATO has been very, very weak. Particularly the way they've acted against dictators. They're coming around and they're doing much, much better now, but the sooner that you take action against dictators and authoritarian thugs, the better your chances are of stopping something like the invasion of the Ukraine.
And to be clear, you're referring to Vladimir Putin as being one of those thugs?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And here he is, putting his nuclear weapons on a higher state of readiness this morning, supposedly because the West, I should say, supposedly because the West has been threatening him. Well, this is straight from authoritarian government's playbook. They lie and lie and lie. And it's going to be a real challenge for our government and for the West to fight this information war, because that's what it is. There are so many lies coming out of Russia in relation to what's going on. He spoke to his own people sometime in the last 24 hours, and he portrayed, according to the reports, he portrayed the invasion of the Ukraine as something related only to the 2 provinces in the Donbass that want to be separate. Now, that's just a straight and outright lie.
What's he doing in Kiev then?
Sorry, say again?
What's he doing in Kiev then?
Oh, exactly. And what is misjudged, I think, is 2 things. The first thing is misjudged is how hard Ukrainians are prepared to fight. He thought he could have a bit of a lightning strike, get in there, bowl over the president, and then from that control the government and tell the army to put their weapons down. But the Ukrainian president has been absolutely fantastic. It didn't work. Their special forces couldn't get into the airport. They shot down 2 big 4-engine aircraft, probably killed 200, 300 people in those aircraft because they were paratroopers that were supposed to take an airfield. They shot down any number of helicopters. So his strike has not worked. So what he does now will be the big question. But he just, but the Russian people is the other thing I think he may have misestimated or underestimated. in that it's not big, but there are very widespread protests in Russia. And the consequences for protesting in Russia are pretty severe. So the people who are doing it across the country are serious. And if this bogs down, and I reckon there's 4,000 Russians have been killed so far, if this thing bogs down and bad things occur, then the Russian mothers are going to be as upset as they were when Russia went into Afghanistan for 8 years.
That's a very interesting point. When you mentioned President Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukraine president, I was reminded of the quote from Abraham Lincoln where he said, "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." He's in power in this context, and we raised an eyebrow when he was a former satirist that used to used to be a comedian mocking the president. He's doing a pretty decent job of being president.
He is, isn't he? And the nation is showing us, is a good lesson to Australia that, when the threat is direct and when the people recognise the threat, the people, particularly the young people, will muster around a country that they love. And I think we're seeing that in Ukraine.
All right, well, it's going to be a rolling situation. Even tomorrow we could talk about it be a different situation. So, Jim Molan, great to chat with you about that and what that means for Australia. Thanks for joining us again on Flow.
Thanks, Richard. It's been good fun. Nice to talk.